G'day, this is Ben from Duck Playing Chicken with a new build series, and I will be building the Perfect Grade Unicorn. This is a complex kit, probably one of the more complex Perfect Grades that I've built, and it does have some sort of issues, but it does look fantastic when it's built up. Now I've already built it up and disassembled it, and my next step is basically to go through and clean up all the parts. So I've disassembled it, I've separated out all the parts into these boxes, and I've got 10 of these boxes, so it's quite a substantial number of parts in this kit. But yes, there's a lot of cleanup to do because when I built it I was pretty lazy and I did sort of base level kind of cleanup of nubs, so I just need to go through and clean them up properly. And I think this is probably a really good opportunity for me to talk about the tools that I use when I'm cleaning up parts, because I use a variety of tools depending on what the shape of the part is and the what the nub's like on it. So I'm going to start with some of the sort of basics, and I guess the basics are sort of sanding sticks, which a lot of people sort of use, and these come in lots of different shapes and forms. So some people will use emery boards for doing nails. Some people will make their own, which I've done in the past, where you take, I've just got this metal, I'm not sure what it's from, an old rod or something, and literally just stick, using double-sided tape, stick some sandpaper to it. So either way, just as long as you've got a surface that you can put some sandpaper on. I use these Ultimate Modeling product ones. I find they're really quite durable. Of course, they're not going to last forever. And certainly the way that I treat them, especially things like these buffing sticks, you do go through them, but I just find these ones tend to last a lot longer than other ones that I've used. So, and they come in a variety of grits. It would be nice if they actually had some indication of what the grits were on the sticks themselves, but they have a color coding. So this light grey one here, this is quite a high grit, so it's quite smooth, whereas this one I call a chainsaw, it's actually quite it's got a low grit and it's really rough, so it's good for sort of cleaning up stuff quickly. Now these are really good for doing surfaces where you have a bit of a curve. So I'm just going to try and find a piece. So for example, this thruster bell here, I would sort of go over, just lightly with what I call a chainsaw, just to get the bulk of that nub off, and then I might go in with a finer grit. And so these are really good because they've got a bit of flex to them. Certainly these big thick ones, they have a lot of give in them, and they're really good for doing sort of curved surfaces like that. And of course, essentially what you're doing when you're sanding is you're creating scratches along the way, and varying depths of scratches depending on the grit you're using. So if I put this one down, start using the finer grit. Now you can still sort of see a little bit of a nub mark there, but when I run my fingernail over it, which is probably the best way to tell, there's no lip or there's no sort of gap or anything. It's smooth as a bell. So this is a buffing stick, and this blue side is it's essentially paper. It's really, really fine grit, and so it's really good at sort of cleaning up after you've done the bulk of the sanding. So you can see that's pretty good there. And then this other side, the white side, is the buffing, the final buffing, and you'll actually hear a bit of a squeak as it goes over the plastic. So you get a real nice clean up, and you get that sort of plastic finish. So these things are probably most of my go-to go-to tools, but I do have variations of that as well. So I have this, which is a flexi file, and so the way this works is that you hold it like this, but it comes with these. You can change out the grits of the sandpaper, so they just have these belts that just slip on and off, and then you let it go and you've got that flexibility. But these are also good for doing things where you've got a bit of a curve. So if I have a look at the other side of this belt, you basically hold it in your hand like that, and you can get sort of a bit of a you can follow a bit of a curve. And I mean, again, it's about sort of using the different grits, start off heavy and then go lighter. But I find that this really good for especially big curved surfaces. You can really sort of get to follow that curve. Now, if you're dealing with just straight flat surfaces, you need to probably go down a different path. And so if you've got something that you need sort of dead flat, I will either use something like this, where it's a hard, rigid, flat surface with sandpaper on it. So this was just something I made up myself. But the other alternative is to use these, which are glass, I believe they're glass nail files, I think they're called. And they're relatively cheap, but they just do a fantastic job on flat surfaces. They're certainly no good for curves, but just have a look at a piece here. It's probably going to be a bit hard to sound camera. But yeah, it's good because it's so rigid. You can just keep it flat, and it just does a great job. And you actually don't need to go down any grits or anything, because these are glass. It will give you a nice sort of final finish. So I find these things really good. You can pick them up on eBay. They're pretty cheap. Certainly go with the glass ones. I do have a larger size one, which I mean, it looks awful, but I find this one's really too coarse. It just eats plastic away really quickly. But I think this is for pedicures or something. I'm not entirely sure, but I wanted a bigger surface one from the little one, but I found that this one's too rough, so I don't use that often. But I do use this small one quite a bit, and of course they're really good because they clean up real easy. You just sort of throw them under the tap and use a toothbrush or something to give them a clean, so they clean really well. So that's for sort of flat surfaces. And going into sort of the other tools that I use every now and then, so I don't use them all the time, but I have these kind of specialized tools here. They actually come in two forms. And I believe, I can't even remember who makes these. If it's, I don't think it was Tamiya, I think it was someone else, I can't remember. It doesn't have any branding on it. I actually bought these when I was living in Japan, so I apologise, I'm not sure who makes these. But the way the system works is you basically wrap a bit of sandpaper around this, I don't know what you call it, collar. And then it folds down, it holds the sandpaper in place, and so you get this nice round surface. So this is really good for getting inside if you've got a piece with a large hole and you need to sort of sand in there. That's really good for that. But I don't use it that often. It's for really specialised cases. And the other one I got, and I don't tend to use this one that much at all, although there's plenty of dust on it. But this is a similar thing. The only difference is, of course, it's square profile or rectangular profile. So it gives you that hard surface again. Unlike the glass file here, I can actually change out the grit of the sandpaper that's on there. So that's sort of I guess a positive using this one. So that's another tool. Probably some of the last things that I use for actually removing stuff, especially in hard to reach areas, I'll actually go to files. Now, given that most of the models I build are plastic kits, sometimes files can give you a really rough finish. So I do have a couple of sort of specialised files that are really fine tooth. which makes them good for plastic models. And I got this one, I think this was a trumpeter one if I remember rightly, but it's a really fine point. Of course, you don't want to be too aggressive with this because you don't want to sort of break the break the file or dig too hard in the plastic. It's really for those super fine areas. So that's a really good one. And the other thing I have is this, and again I think this was, I'm not sure who made this because I got it sort of a while ago, but it's an interesting take on these files. You can get needle files, that's what these are called, needle files. You can get them pretty cheap, and you can get them sort of in shops where you get cheap stuff from. But this one's good because it's got a holder and it's got a chuck in the top of it, so you can put it in there, and it just gives you a little bit more sort of control, I guess, or I just find this one a bit easier to use than just using the file itself. The other thing is that it comes with a range of needle files, so that's the other good thing about it. And you've got all those different ones you can select from. So as far as removing material from the models, that's probably all the tools that I use. Actually, no, it's not. I have a couple more to show you. As you can tell, I love my tools. Alright, this is a very cool tool to use for very specific types of seam removals. I'm not really into Citadel products, their tools, because they are really expensive for what they are, but this one is awesome, and it is specifically for removing mold seams, and it's a rigid bit of metal that's got sort of a bit of a sharp corner to it, and you run it along a piece. So let's see, this piece here, it has a mold seam right in the middle, and you literally just scrape it off. And as long as you keep it straight or flat to the edge, you will get a fantastic result. So this is a really good tool, but it's really for those sort of mold seams that you see on pieces. I mean, it's made for minis, where you've got characters that have got a mold seam sort of down them. You can use this to sort of scrape it off. But because this is a rigid piece of metal here, it doesn't flex or bend, so you're less likely to get it jumping as you scrape across, unlike using a hobby knife with a scalpel blade or something like that. I do use this quite a bit for removing nubs. It's sort of good. You can get in there and scrape nubs away, and you can do it quite gently or quite aggressively depending on the size of the nub. So I also use just a hobby knife. So that's it as far as the tools I use for material removal. That's pretty much it. The only other thing that I use is about getting rid of the dust. So I recently bought one of these. I didn't sort of really know that these existed, but this is an anti-static brush, and so this is a Tamiya brush, and it's really good for especially when you're filing things down with fine sanding sticks and stuff. You get a lot of dust, so this works really well for removing that dust off pieces after you've sanded them. So I use that as well. But that is pretty much it as far as the tools that I use for sanding pieces down in preparation for paint. So I might cut to a bit of a time lapse of me just going through cleaning up some of these parts, and in the next video we'll start looking at the painting side of things. I'm going to show you a trick where if you have a bit of plastic where it's a bit stressed, and you can see that white stress mark there where the nub's been cut off. If you're not planning to paint especially your Gundam models, that can be really disheartening, and you can use a Gundam marker or something to cover that up, and and then cover it in a flat coat or whatever you want to do. But there is another way of actually getting rid of those stress marks. So I just want to quickly show you. You actually need like a lighter or something, and you want to be really careful because you don't want to obviously melt the plastic, but what you want to do is you want to get enough heat into it that the stress mark. So I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. So you can see that very clear white mark there, and what you can do is go get some fire on it, and I'm just sort of literally rolling it over, and already it's still there, but it is reduced heavily. So okay, so you can see how that white mark is now gone. There's still a little bit of a I guess a depression, but there's no longer that sort of white really stark white mark there. So what you could do then is do a bit of sanding on it. And sometimes the flame will be enough. It'll clean it up beautifully, but like in the case of this one where I've actually sort of dug in a bit too deep with the plastic nippers, I've got that stress mark in there. Now it doesn't matter for this particular piece because I know where this sits and it's never seen, but I'll just buff it up a little bit. But especially for those of you who don't actually paint your models. Obviously if you paint your models it's not an issue as long as the surface is smooth, but you can sort of you can get rid of that mark. There's still an indentation there, but there's no, you can see that white mark's completely gone. So that's just a little trick. If you come across stress marks in plastic, heat can be your best friend, but of course you just want to brush a flame over it. You don't want to keep that heat on there, or of course your plastic will melt. So be really careful doing that. But that was just a trick. I can't remember who I picked it up from. It was someone on YouTube, I think, if I remember rightly. And yeah, it's just really helpful for getting rid of those stress marks.